he wants to have or to earn, but it was forced upon her. I'd like to introduce to you Michelle Black, the Gold Star widow of Special Forces Staff Sergeant Brian Black.
It's okay, I know I'm short. Thank you so much. It's a huge honor to be here today. 20 years, it's absolutely astounding that it has been that long. I could stand up here today and tell you my story, tell you where I was, how old I was when 9/11 happened, but I won't because it's not relevant. We all remember that moment, and whether we were children at home with our parents or watching television with our coworkers, we all experienced the same thing: terror. Like a catastrophic earthquake, splitting the world in two and letting loose demons from their long-held cells buried beneath the Earth's surface. Sorry, I'm nervous. Fear and anger gripped us all from deep within our souls. That day, every American was shaken to their core, and the knowledge that the fabric of our lives would be forever changed set in. That evening, the entire country tuned in to watch as President George W. Bush addressed the nation. He began, "Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat, but they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundation of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we are the brightest beacon of freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, 20 years later, I tell you that the foundations of our great nation are untouched. America still stands tall and proud as the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world. And that is in no small part thanks to the men and women who were willing to go and sacrifice their time, their efforts, and even their lives to show that we will always defend our nation against its enemies. America responded to the attacks with the best we had to offer, as our men and women lined up in droves to volunteer for our armed services. The influx of those wanting to fight in the global war on terror continued for many years following the 9/11 attacks. My husband was one of those men who in 2009 signed his name on the dotted line to serve his country and do his part to stamp out the evil we saw visit our shores so many years ago. It was also my husband, Staff Sergeant Brian Black, whose name was added to the long list of those whose lives were lost in this fight when his Green Beret team was ambushed by ISIS militants in Africa 4 years ago. We have heard many this past month asking if it was all worth it as we withdraw from Afghanistan. Since 2001, we have been on a warpath as a country, spending years and countless dollars on the global war on terror, something that before 2001 was known to Americans as just another third world problem until the day it came knocking on our door. That day, we decided as a nation that the U.S. was going to defeat terror. The problem with defeating terror is that it is not static. It is not a singular event, and it does not have a singular cause or source. Terror is a living, breathing, moving, and constantly changing organism. Terror is built upon radical ideals and fed by hate. Much like the hate that feeds it, terror can never be satisfied. And it can never be fully snuffed out, as it is something that is nurtured in the hearts of men. To combat something so elusive has proven frustrating and heartbreaking over the past 20 years. But was it worth it? 4 years. In exactly 3 weeks and 2 days, it will have been 4 years since terror came knocking on my front door. I am up here today because my family has been personally affected by terror, and yes, it was worth the cost to combat it. In a world filled with evil, the just and the moral must always take a stand. Human beings will always need a beacon of hope. Much like terror, freedom, too, is a living, breathing organism. When the seed of freedom has been planted in a person's soul, and they have been given time to taste it, they see hope for a better life. For 20 years, the Afghan people tasted freedom, and the seed was planted into the heart of its people and its children. Now we must let that seed do its work, and hope it has taken root and will play out for the better somewhere in the future. Freedom is something that all those who live in this great nation know. But the sacrifices that afforded us this democracy are known by only a few. And a large portion of those who truly know the cost are the children left behind by our fallen service members. In our times of reflection, my sons often remember who they are as children of a hero and think on the legacy their father left to them. Every one of our nation's heroes leave behind a legacy of courage that their children carry with them each day in their hearts. It is often the children of our nation's heroes who go on to fill their parents' boots. And so when one soldier falls, 2 more rise up in their place. We are a nation of brave men and women who deserve our respect of their sacrifice, and that is why we build monuments to remember our warriors. We say their names and honor them, knowing full well that one day our children may be them. And though we may lose a battle and our heroes may lose their lives, we stand resolute in the knowledge that we will always win the war. Our heroes die knowing their children will be raised in the greatest nation on earth with every advantage known to man. Terrorism is born of cowardice and hate, but freedom and democracy is born of courage and love. So let's celebrate our differences and hold tight to our freedoms, never forgetting the true cost of sacrifice. To understand that cost, we must fully understand sacrifice. When we use the word sacrifice, we often imagine one act. But really, sacrifice is a way of life. It goes on and on once you've committed to it. My family began sacrificing the day Brian signed on to the Army and left me alone with 2 babies while he went to boot camp. That is when sacrifice begins for all military families. Each year, There were sacrifices made. Hope I'm not missing a page. No. But each year there were sacrifices made with the understanding that one day our family may very well have to make the ultimate sacrifice. We give up so much when we commit to a life in the service to our country. We give up our home and our friends as we move multiple times, wherever the military tells us to go. We give up attending family members' weddings, funerals, and births because it does not fit into the deployment schedule. Sacrifice does not even end when your husband's life does. For my sons, they have lost the father who would teach them how to throw and catch a ball, tie a tie, be a good sport, talk to a girl they like. The sacrifice of the fallen is a long and painful list. Do not be fooled into think the sacrifice of the fallen ends when the final shot is volleyed. The sacrifices made by the men and women protecting our freedom plays out over generations. It plays out in the lives of their husbands and their wives, their children, their grandchildren, their mothers, their fathers, their sisters, their brothers. It also plays out in the lives of those who stood beside them in battle and had to carry the news and the scars back home with them. But more precious than the lives lost is the freedom that their sacrifice afforded. Our men and women over generations have given their lives without hesitation to defend and protect this great bastion of freedom and hope, known as America. May we never ask, even for a second, if it was worth it, when a widow like me will tell you without hesitation that it absolutely was. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Michelle. We have one final guest speaker.